Morning at NTV.
All right, we do journey on with more affairs concerning your state. This morning in our Kickstarter, we're going to be analyzing the budget processes for the financial year upcoming 2023-2024 with the feasibility of Uganda's budgeting for the same financial year. Of course, picking leaves and leaflets from the present financial year, post-COVID-19, the promises that were made and where we stand right now. The backbone being that the budget strategy for the next financial year, 2023-2024, addresses socio-economic challenges we face today and also builds on the strong foundation that we have laid in the past. COVID-19, the pandemic still remains, its effects, we still eat on them, but nevertheless, we do have four major macroeconomic shocks that we need to focus on, namely the rising global inflation. You do have the high and rising interest rates. Let's talk about the high debt levels and, of course, the strong US dollar, which is causing the depreciation of the Ugandan shilling, as well as the rising domestic inflation. The combined impact of all these shocks has been the decline in real incomes, leading to rising household poverty. And in addition, the cost of borrowing has increased sharply, as well as fiscal room and flexibility have been reduced further. We are here to interrogate the budget processes with that backbone for the financial year 2023-2024, and perhaps have a study of the proposals that are on table to significantly make good decisions for futuristic returns. I am joined by Mr. Godber Tumushabe, who is a policy analyst. Good morning to you, Mr. Tumushabe.
Good morning, and good morning, our viewers.
How is the coffee?
Coffee is doing well so far. It's a rainy season in Ntungamu, so the rains are bad, but at least you know, when you have rains, most of the crops tend to do quite a bit well. But also the rains have demonstrated that as a country we really need to stop the political rhetoric about irrigation and be able to support farmers to do irrigation, because we've talked a lot about it, but for us who are involved in the farming business, you actually feel it. You feel it's a real problem that we seem to talk more about, but not solving it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We are also joined by an economics analyst, Dr. Fred Muhumuza, who seems to be disturbed by the fact that Mulago, as of this morning, is stuck with a number of dead machines. And this all ties into the conversation for this morning.
Exactly. That's a really very disappointing thing. This is our national referral hospital, and you want to bring investors. Now, when the investor reads this headline, he knows at one point he or his employee may fall sick. So he has to incur that cost to take his employee to Nairobi. Because this is his manager. That is if he even attracts that manager to come to Uganda. Because their managers will say, well, how is the health condition in Uganda? So I'm not looking at your infrastructure. I'm looking at, in the event I fall sick, no, Uganda is not for me to work in. And this is his best manager who starts industries. So it's not about an industrial park there, a power line here. It is this whole thing must be there. So that for me is the perspective that I don't see in government when I read the rhetoric in government. No, we are going to recover because I put some little money in UDB. Oh, I'm not looking at, I have my money. I have my money. All I'm saying is when this person falls sick, the cost of airlifting to Nairobi will come into my cost of doing business.
Definitely.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Let's start by having an interrogation of the budget processes so far for the next financial year. Of course, speaking up from what we have presently, we've had this debate with you here with the present financial year that we are in, and we have seen a lot of challenges here and there. Reflecting on how things started off for this financial year with all the post-COVID-19 strains, do you feel that the government has done its due diligence in the present financial year? I'll start with you, Mr. Tumushabe.
Yeah, so first of all, I say that the challenges that we have that have been highlighted, COVID-19, the war in the Russian-Ukrainian war, and the resulting financial crisis, global financial crisis, these are factors that almost affect everybody. The interesting thing about this country, which I think Fred should help explain to our viewers, is that every time there is resilience of the economy, the government tells us our economy is very strong because it is not affected by the global events. When the economy seems to be bad, then they use the global events to explain why we are doing bad. So I think there is always inconsistency in what the global events mean to our economy. But secondly, I think in terms of the actions, my view is that we've seen a number of actions being taken, which I think are good. You know, the attempt to put money in UDB, to put money in microcredit finance institutions. But I think I've argued time and again that this economy lacks real economic stimulus. How do you invest in certain sectors that are able to create jobs, that are able to put money into the pockets of individuals? I see, for example, like the crisis we're facing here in Kampala. You have a capital city that basically has almost shut down. The road infrastructure is almost gone. Right now, there is our friend Spy has been running a Twitter campaign on potholes, which is and I think, as Fred is saying, the person who is out there thinking of investing in Uganda is looking at Kampala and looking at the campaign going on potholes and it's like, is that where I want to put my money? So my view, what I've been looking for is where a government thinks very purposefully and said, but one, we have to open up our capital city, because that's where we get most of our GDP within the Kampala, Mukono, and Entebbe axis. We can open it up, invest in creating first-class infrastructure in this city. One, we'll have opened up the city, we'll have made our city look good, we'll have created jobs, we'll have created markets for a lot of inputs. So I'm looking for those kinds of inputs, of stimulus. The agriculture economy, I think everybody knows that this country, part of its resilience is its agriculture economy. But you know, we've not invested purposefully in safeguarding the integrity, the ecological integrity of our environment. And yet all our agriculture is still rain-fed. We are a nature-based economy. The agriculture still employs over 70% of the population. So one, you would have to have very deliberate investments in the environment and natural resources sector, and then invest in agriculture. Because I think for me, those can be important stimulus investments that one can make. Okay. So the government tries to do so many things, but you don't feel like there is a purposeful action. The priority list is not resonating with what is on ground. Okay, infrastructure development, especially central-wise, and also investing in job-creating sectors. When it comes to you, Dr. Fred Muhumuza, with your analysis, monitoring and evaluation, in the present financial year, where do we see, especially the commitment to private sector investments and initiatives and all these incentives that were put on ground? What has been the reality thereof?
I think the reality is the intended incentives have turned out to be disincentives. Why? Now, you might say we are putting cheap, affordable credit in UDB. People can, and then you have invested in UDC, you have invested in SACCOs. But you're borrowing at 17, 18% and trying to lend at 12%. Who is going to cover that shortfall? Because you have already made a loss, you as government. Because the money we are putting in UDB is through the main budget. We are financing the main budget by borrowing at 17, 18%. So you can't put that in UDB and tell UDB you must lend. That's a policy distortion. So the few who can access UDB money are getting a subsidy from government. Now, you are failing because of that borrowing. I wish you had borrowed and went and paid off arrears. Because the private sector you want to promote, you actually have undermined it. Right now we are getting information that the arrears to the private sector are 7.5 trillion. Yeah. That's the biggest disincentive you have done to the very entity that is supposed to drive your economy, the very entity that is supposed to pay the taxes. Now I hear conversation that we are going to get debt sustainability by increasing domestic revenue mobilization. From what? Yeah. Because if only you paid your arrears of 7.5 trillion, those fellows will give you back 3 trillion in taxes, or possibly maybe 2.5 trillion. So they're already curtailed and crippled. And these people, it ripples out because they borrowed from the banking sector to come and deliver government services. Now, they have also created non-performing assets to the banks, which is really a very big risk to the banking sector. Non-performing assets, which is basically, for our viewers, these are loans that banks lend out, so they become an asset to the bank. But the borrowers are unable to pay, so this asset is not performing. And the bank is supposed to write down its profit or bring in a new equity, which is other shareholders' money. But it introduces that big risk into the banking sector that the central bank is worried of. Now, what do the banks do? They begin to look at everybody as a risky borrower and say, going forward, I am not going to lend to these entities because they are unable to pay. And someone looking 10 years back, 5 years back, the best people banks would lend are those with a government contract because it was a sure deal. But now the sure deal is gone. So you want to look deeper and say, what is it that we are not seeing? You don't just run off with one thing. So economic analysis really tries to say, is what I am seeing everything? And if it's not everything, what else am I not seeing? Is it positive? Is it not positive? So before you do your rhetoric here, that I'm going to boost the economy will recover from COVID, because I've put some SME financing out there, I've repaired the roads, I've made my spending. What have you done to the private sector? Because that's what is supposed to recover this economy, which is now a very, very dicey area.
Okay, dicey area. Let's talk about the debt. The increase in borrowing has definitely resulted into a lot of significance, especially the cost of debt servicing that he's referring to. Last fiscal years, you have the debt servicing to revenue had been increased to 30.6% when we look at the financial year 2021 to 2022, from 21.7% in the financial year before COVID-19. This has also further reduced the fiscal space and fiscal flexibility and resources available for the government expenditures. Now, this will definitely include health as well as education. We therefore, I believe, need an urgent prioritization restructuring, if we can call it that, Mr. Tumushabe. When it comes to priority restructuring, what should government be restructuring as important as do or die situation of a tendency in the next financial year?
I actually think that you see, there are two things. One is whether there is one having interest, and then second, having the capacity to do it. The fundamental question for me is whether government of Uganda actually has capacity to do restructuring. Because you see, incidentally, the people who are technical, you know, the technical people within the ministries, they try to do so many things. And no matter the imperfections that exist and the challenges that they face, they make an attempt. But Uganda's problem is not even a budget or a revenue problem. I think it's a political problem. Because at the end of the day, the execution of the budget more or less like runs more as a budget, as a political process. So if you think of the things that have been done over the last, over the course of this year, you've seen the attempt to put money into the PDM, the parish development model, and then you ask yourself, is this actually a restructuring? Are we sure that by investing the money that we are proposing to invest, that is if it was done? Because most of the parishes that you look at, they will tell you, oh, money actually, it seems it has come, but it's on the account. You can't access it. And you've seen the president actually quarreling with everybody and say, I'm going to lock up some people. Normally he likes threatening even when he's not able to do it. But essentially, you are moving money into more or less like subsistence production, but meanwhile, the infrastructure is collapsing. The road networks are collapsing. Even when you go to a place like Ntungam, where I come from, and you look at the road network there, you'll travel on a very good road from Kampala probably up to Kabale. Just veer off the main road, which are the main veins of the economy. The roads are impassable. So you do PDM, but you can't do the roads. Secondly, this is the operation of the government right now, they operate like cartels. Yeah, so and of course people like calling it corruption, but actually these are cartels. So you have a good budget process, it delivers money for Karamoja, but there is a cartel within the government that then diverts the entire strategy that you have designed at the technical level. So the politicians now are able to sit down and so we want to distribute assets. Now we can distribute it amongst ourselves, because you have to use them to do the campaigns, because the delivery of a campaign is different from delivery of an economic activity or an economic strategy. But you can also say, you can even scale it up and say, okay, the president right now is busy campaigning, so he calls them wealth creation tours. If you go back to 2000, that's something normally he does mid-term. Mid-term, his term of office, he creates something called wealth creation tours. This is from 2000. So if you think of the money, the resources that go with the president to go and spend a week or two in West Nile or Acholi or whatever, that is a hell lot of money. Now, of course, the president, it's okay for him to go around and mobilizing people, but you don't want the president to operate like a community development officer, because you have an infrastructure of government that should be able to deliver.
On that regard, Dr. Muhumuza, I do remember the policy dialogue that we had recently. This very same conversation was brought about in terms of the expenditure of public service and how it can actually, if toned down, if cut down, goes a long way to mitigate some of these things that we see recurring every time we're having budgeting for different financial years. And in response to that, of course, there was something that the PSST did say about that.
Yeah, of course, expenditure of public services, as mentioned, which area of public service is spending? How do you want to engineer? Because about the policies and the institutions drive the budget. Now, in Uganda, we literally discuss the budget. But a budget without the institutions to actualize it and make it sensible is not a budget. And even if you have the things to actualize it, but the policies are wrong, again, you're not going to get what you're looking for. Now, in the coming budget, I think they have given 1 billion per district to go and do the roads he's talking about.
You can imagine.
Now, besides that being very little money, going by the fuel costs and whatever, the road equipment in most of these districts is dead.
Yeah.
So you're sending the billion to do what? To revive the grader. One tire of a grader, I don't know how much it costs.
Million.
But I know some other cars, to put 4 tires on a car is 10 million.
Yes, of course.
So what is a grader? If this bulldozer lost its chain, how much would that cost? But is the chain in the country in the first place?
No, it has to be imported.
So these are institutional issues that you want to look at and say, now we have released 200 billion for all the districts and local governments to do their road network. All they are going to do is now get dust off these machines. Before they are even done with the dust, the 1 billion is over. So the roads will continue. So who is looking at that policy? Who is looking at that institutional framework? These are the things that really drive the country. And this is what God by saying, are we able to face it? If a minister says, I am the one taking iron sheets to a school, I want even to arrest you. Don't say you put it. That's not your role. So the next thing we'll find a minister carrying malaria drugs to a health facility. There is a system supposed to do that. We do our planning. The budget we are going to appropriate in Parliament next month is supposed to have begun in September. But even before September, there are district development plans, which pick from a parish development plan. You sit with the people, bottom-up planning. What is needed in this parish? Oh, our school there has no iron sheets. Our health facility there has no maternity ward. You put it in the district plan, and then it comes up, it becomes a health sector plan, which is now joins the program for human development. Now, the only role of the MP is to make sure that budget is appropriated. And then you go back to check on the system to see what did it happen. But even we have councillors, because an MP goes there occasionally, some of them are hiding, but at least a councillor sleeps there. It becomes a local government responsibility. But we have undermined that institution called the local government. And yet these are our foot soldiers. How I wish we really modeled out our development agenda on the basis of the military. Last week we saw Mr. Museveni sending 5,000 guys across the border into the Congo. These are his foot soldiers. Every decision he makes in Kampala will be implemented by those guys. If those guys have no posho, have no fuel, the mission is dead. So similarly, we must recognize if the local government doesn't have this and that, the mission is dead. Now, when I look at all this, we are buying ambulances, referral system, to bring patients from referral levels. The machines in Mulago are dead. What has happened to the machines at the other referral level in Gulu?
Spending, but at the same
so
time,
what is the ambulance about? To only shift a point of death. Because the doctor you are bringing to Mulago, by the way, these machines are at the heart of diagnosis of all departments. The Heart Institute man sends there, the gynecologist sends there, the pediatrician sends there. So they receive that feedback. Now, it doesn't matter whether you have state-of-the-art ambulances, you even go to a chopper. If this machine is dead, you are dead on arrival yourself. So who is going to look at the whole system? And this is what we are talking about. Are we able to overhaul this whole system, including changing the policies, including changing the institutions, so that your budget begins to speak to you?
Mr. Tumshave, which policies do you feel could use a revision so as to support local governance that feeds into the bigger picture?
And he's a local government person.
Yeah, no, you know, I have mentioned this point over and over. I have discussed it with the senior level government officials. I said, if you have a policy and you try to divert from it without changing the policy, you are screwed up. So this country adopted a decentralization system under the 1995 Constitution. It's very clearly laid out. It's decentralization, the local government structure clearly laid out. These were supposed to be local governments that have power, have authority, and have money. But you know, normally when you have regimes like ours, they don't like deconcentrating power. If anything, they rely on concentration of power. So what has happened over the last over 20 years of the current constitutional framework is that the power that was envisaged to be vested in the local governments under the constitution has been sucked up back to the center. So what you have districts, I normally call districts like poorly run NGOs. You know, you can have NGOs. NGOs can be very, very efficient, but you have poor ones. So you think of a district local government right now as a poorly run NGO. So when we sit back in Kampala and budget and plan, thinking that the district local government system is the mechanism for service delivery, you are basically wrong from the word go. In fact, me, I have argued and said, until we change the economic structure of this government, which is creating the different regions of Uganda as economic pillars, you know, and you know, some of us who are the immediate post-independence generation, we used to study these regions: Karamoja, Teso, Ankole, Buganda, Bunyoro. Even they even had economic activities around them. We would memorize them. You knew that Teso was a cattle keeping economy. Karamoja was a cattle economy. Buganda was a coffee economy. Bunyoro was a coffee banana mix. Bunyoro was tobacco and something. So they were very clear. I think that as a country, we must be able to rethink and say, these regions are our economic pillars. You can't build this economy from Kampala. This economy has to be built from below. So in other words, if you don't see the budget, a budget strategy that says there's so much money that is going to Bunyoro, and therefore the people in Bunyoro are required to deliver on certain goods, services, and assets. There is a certain budget going to Teso. We are really going to continue moving in circles because Kampala has become like a deep hole. Well,
I think programs like the PDM then cover up for what
they don't. They don't.
According to them, not really.
Oh, in design.
In design.
And this is what he has said.
From, from the top to bottom.
When you deviate from something without revising it, Now, like we deviated from the decentralization policy, you cannot implement PDM without local governments.
No, you can't.
And that was already the first elite capture of the PDM, making it a central government business. The PDM is literally deepening decentralization. It talks about the local government roads. It talks about parish chiefs and sub-county chiefs and cows and extension service providers. All these are district employees. But that discussion, you find it at the headquarters. You have not sent money to the local government to recruit the extension staff. Now I hear Coffee in his space. Coffee has its own extension staff. Now what will the cow do when they don't deliver? Can I discipline them? They are recruited from the center and posted in my space. I don't know who they are. So you want to, don't disempower the local government, because these are your foot soldiers.
Okay.
I want to believe every morning Mr. Museveni has a conversation with the command operation soldier. What do you need? Then the guy will tell him, oh, a chopper wasn't functioning the other day. The fuel, the drugs, the food rations, the spying, the drone wasn't working, and the man will prioritize that. So I want a central government official who every week receives feedback from the cows. What is it that you need? If we had done it regularly with Mulago, Mulago has an in charge. He knows when these machines died. Who called him? So that we address that issue. Now, Auditor General is always after the fact.
Okay, let's talk about the upcoming financial year. For the next financial year and over the mid-term, you're looking at the government's fiscal policy, prioritizing improving competitiveness when it comes to the economy by lowering the cost of doing business. Is that going to be a realistic projection for the next financial year?
Let me begin with God by space. When you do competitiveness, you're competing with who? Global levels. One of the core things you want is the cost of capital. Now, people think financing must always come from the banks. In Uganda, I will capitalize UDB and lower the cost of doing business. You're capitalizing UDB, which is your bank, by borrowing from Stanbic on a commercial rate. You are borrowing from Stanchart to capitalize your entity. How did we finance flowers and fish? The Europeans who consume the fish and the flowers actually came and rolled out these investments. So how do we finance coffee? Find the fellows, the Germans, who are allegedly the biggest exporters of coffee, to come and invest in the upstream. Now, it will not be a government space, but the Germans, as we said, need to be assured that their money they are sending to Uganda as equity, it comes with no loan, it is a private-to-private partnership. This business of public-private partnerships can only run if you have done the private-to-private partnerships, B2B as the language is. Let the business people in Uganda partner with the business people in Germany. They will finance themselves, because here you have no money. So competitiveness with this road infrastructure, you are not going to get it out.
Okay, all right. I would like to hear from Mr. Tumshawe. You talked about sectors. And for you, what do you feel should be the top prioritized sectors that can move in terms of ensuring that they contribute to, of course, the budget funding
let me start
will be presented before us in the few months to come?
Let me start with the strategy of the minister, the one that was presented to Parliament. I think if I was Parliament, I would throw out this strategy. I would send it back the guys at the Ministry of Finance to rethink, because you can't do the same things the same old way by the same old people and expect a different result. Right. So when you look at the strategy of the government, what they have talked about rationalizing merging of government departments. It's like the core economic strategy there. And we know that this thing was started at the beginning of this term of office of the president. So it comes every year. So do you have a timeline for doing this? Because you see there, you can do certain things and you do them over and over and over, and you feel like you are doing something, but actually you are not even making progress. Now, secondly, you look at the question of rule of law. They have one of the pillars of the strategy is rule of law, and they said they are going to build courts. But when you read that strategy, you feel like, okay, do these guys actually know what it means to promote rule of law deliver justice. The courts, and the courts are probably the physical infrastructure of the courts is one of the small things in this in the justice delivery system. Then the part of the other the economic strategy is PDM. I am not I don't know Fred, but the entire government seems to feel like with PDM you found the magic bullet to this economy. I have failed to understand.
We found the bullet, but is the gun functioning?
I've basically failed to understand the whole thing of this
so
PDM with the magic bullet.
Of course, our time is fast spent, but I know that we're going to be continuously having you here, you know, to throw more light and cast the roadmap for the financial year 2023-2024 as government and its entities are working towards that planning process. This brings us to the end of Morning at NTV this morning. Of course, turn to our social media pages for all these comments that have been shared here. Hashtag Morning at NTV. On behalf of Chris Igeni and myself, Priscilla, Regina Naloga, have a good day.